You don't seem to want to accept the fact that you're dealing with an expert in guerrilla warfare.
Are you telling me that 200 men against your boy is a no-win situation for us?
If you send that many, don't forget one thing. A good supply of body bags. Sylvester Stallone. This time, he's fighting for his life. First blood.
Hey guys, I'm Kevin.
I'm Jake.
And this is Movie Matters. Today we're talking about the 1982 film First Blood with Sylvester Stallone. I think we kind of talked about this before, that we both haven't seen this movie in a long time, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I've only watched it once in my life.
Same.
I've seen all the other ones. Have you seen the other movies?
No.
No.
I haven't. I saw Rambo in theaters, but that's the only other one I've seen. And again, only saw it once.
Yeah, they're all pretty decent. I like them. It's kind of like the Rocky movies. It's like, oh, let's just make another sequel. But I like all the Rocky movies. I like Sylvester Stallone. I kind of mentioned this before. Like I used to, I prefer Schwarzenegger obviously over him, but I've begun to like Stallone a lot more as of recently, because I had never watched all the Rocky movies and I watched them recently. I need to rewatch all these Rambo movies, but this movie is interesting to me because I kind of went in thinking it's going to be an action movie and it's really not.
Yeah.
You agree?
Yeah, it's much more of yeah, it's hard to classify.
Yeah,
I mean, there's parts
it's more
of it that
drama.
are almost like a horror movie too, and like especially when like he's picking off, like the sheriff's department one by one. It's not like horror in the sense that like it's scary, but it's it kind of puts you in the headspace of the guys being hunted.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's much more of like
it's a survivalist film, and like it's a drama, but like survivalist film, and it's interesting because this movie reminds me of like Blade Runner from the same year. It's like everyone thinks Blade Runner is an action movie, and it's totally not.
Right. Yeah.
And like this movie again, I kind of went in with the expectation because I hadn't seen it in so long that this was going to be like action packed. I mean, there is action, but it was definitely more of a drama. And I think this was a good contrast to Commando, even though Commando came out later, and it came out the same year as the sequel of this movie, which the sequel is a full-blooded action movie, for sure. Mm-hmm. But like this one, it's like the writing is good. So Stallone did some work on the script, and I don't know, I like it. I enjoy it. I don't love it like I do Commando.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, haven't seen it and having not seen it in so long?
Yeah, I mean, I would kind of agree. It's a very good movie. It's well done especially for its age, I guess. It deals with a lot of very heavy themes in like a much more modern way than like I would expect for the year that it came out. It deals with everything from like the treatment of Vietnam veterans and lightly touches on like post-traumatic stress and that kind of stuff. And then it doesn't necessarily throw it in your face, but there's a lot of like questions of like morality and like who's actually in the right in this situation of, between the sheriff and John Rambo, in the middle of, they're both kind of on their own personal like tirades through this little town. And like, there's a lot of collateral damage because of the decisions that they're each making, you know. So yeah, it's I'd say it's pretty ahead of its time. But yeah, not really like it's almost like the antithesis of Commando. It's like, even though on the surface it's both kind of about like two war veterans who are like reluctantly dragged back in, they're like completely opposite in how they handle all of the subject material. It's like, you can kind of feel the gravity of like every, because like Stallone doesn't even kill anybody in this movie, as far as I can remember.
Not purposeful. On purpose.
Right. Yeah. But like in Commando, it's just like absolute disregard for human life, you know, like across the board.
Just kill all these soldiers that probably have a family.
Right. So yeah, I mean, they're very, very polar opposite.
Yeah. And I'm curious, like having you say that, I'm thinking like, what was the first movie that changed the tide? You know, the first action movie that was like, let's just fucking kill everyone.
Just nail everybody. Yeah, it's a good question.
I wonder what it was.
Yeah, I would think it would have to have been late 70s or like early 80s. What year was Commando again?
85.
85?
I think it was like early-ish 80s. Mm-hmm. Like 83, 84 maybe. I don't know. Maybe it was Commando. I think it's like, I think that's like the start of it, and then it was like competition. We'll have to look into that more. But this movie was the first movie that wasn't from the Rocky series that didn't bomb, because Stallone made some other movies in his career around this time and in like this like late 70s that all bombed. This movie was a really good success. It was originally budgeted at $11 million, but it ended up going over at $17 million, but made a lot of money at the box office, so that was good. It's got that same theme from Commando as like the one-man army theme, you know, going up against someone or a lot of, you know, like the whole police station. But I like how you said, like, you don't know. There's kind of that gray area of, like, who do you root for in this movie? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, who's right and who's wrong? And, like, there's such a gray area with that, and it's, like, very morally conflicting, and I like that.
Yeah, and, like, it does help that Rambo, like I said, doesn't actually kill anybody. He definitely fuck some people up for life, but what's the guy's Galt, I think, is the one guy that is like really shitty. He falls out of the helicopter, which is like kind of an accident. It's not really Rambo like killing him. Everybody else is just like either, I mean, they're probably maimed. And like a lot of them will probably never walk again, or but like no, he doesn't kill anybody, which is I think a really important point in the movie, and kind of something that his like commanding officer kind of like uses a few different times throughout the movie, where he's like, you'd all be dead already, like if he really wanted, you know, it that way, you know, kind of stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, it gives him a little bit of a high ground, I think. But at the same time, like, you know, the sheriff's an asshole. All of the like police officers are kind of assholes. But Rambo escalates this every step of the way, you know, as well. So it's not really like it's not as one-sided as you would be led to believe, you know. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting question about like who's actually who you should be kind of rooting for.
And I think that's what makes it a good movie.
Yeah.
Cuz like it's a lot about police brutality and abuse of power. and the cops like beating the shit out of Stallone, and him like, there's that one cop that's played by David Caruso from CSI Miami fame. He's kind of like the only one that's questioning all these cops that are like super power hungry, like, yeah, let's fucking go and get this guy,
Yeah. And he's not even pushing back that hard either.
No.
Like, it's just like little things, and they kind of tell him to shut up, and then he kind of just does,
Yeah. And that's kind of like a whole, I mean, we could probably get into that even more of like the whole peer pressure and like all these cops being like, like, don't be a wuss. Like, this guy's breaking the law. Like, that's our job to uphold the law. Like, we do that. And then he's the only, he's kind of the odd man out.
Right.
So he's got to kind of, peer pressure conform to these cops. Pretty interesting, for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And like, I think the filmmaking's really done well when it shows like the flashbacks that Stallone has, that Rambo has, during like while they're kind of like beating him up or like forcing him against his will to like, shave him and stuff like that. And like, he's got these, he's like in the jail, and there's like the flashback to him being in the Vietnam prison, which is like him being a POW, which is cool. And, like I said, like David Caruso, he's like, I think this guy's like crazy. And it's like, he definitely is walking that line of like, is he crazy, or it's just like, PTSD and all this stuff.
Yeah, that's an interesting part of it is that, I think this is where, the movie simultaneously, I think deals with excessive violence in like a very like meaningful way, where again it's like handles it the complete opposite to Commando, where like the violence in this movie is very limited and restrained and like purposeful. I'd say.
Yeah, it's got an impact.
Yeah, and like it deals with that in a very interesting way, and also deals with like the post-Vietnam era, I guess, and like almost harkens back to like a lot of the shit that the soldiers returning home had to deal with. And he even talks about it in the movie, like getting spit on and called like a baby killer and stuff like that. And like these police, whether or not they're treating him this way because he's a Vietnam veteran, it kind of harkens back to that, which, wasn't really that many years earlier, from when this movie came out. We're talking maybe 5-6 years, I think, when Vietnam ended. But yeah, it kind of reintroduces that kind of like negativity and like stigma of veterans, and kind of handles it in a very it handles it in a very well done way. It kind of also
compassion.
gives you a very good perspective from the veteran, and what it's like to kind of have to go through that. So it on the surface, this movie is not, quite as deep as it actually is, which I think is, like you said, what kind of makes it a really good movie. But it's definitely not in the vein of the like shoot 'em up 80s action movies, that we'll be doing the rest of this month. But, it's definitely worth covering because it's because it is different, I think.
Yeah, and that's why I like talking about these movies, because just a quick viewing of it, you don't realize these kind of surface level or like subtextual things that go on as deep as we're kind of dissecting it right now. And that's why I like doing this. And it's interesting because while you were talking, I was kind of thinking that, it was such an anti-American thing to, spit on soldiers and, treat veterans in such a poor way. That's, excuse me, that's such like an anti-American thing, 100%. Like, Americans are very, pro-veteran, pro our military, all that stuff. And this was such a different time in America, and the treatment was just so different compared to like any other time, honestly. And this movie does a good job of showing that. And I think this time, as funny as this sounds, is crucial to 80s movies because it like basically ushers in that like, this is American. Let's like, we didn't win in Vietnam and now let's go watch Commando and show a bunch of dudes getting killed and like, yeah, America, guns.
Exactly. Like that's the thing that like I've noticed in a lot of these 80s action movies, and like we talked about it a lot in Die Hard in particular, and this movie has it in excess as well, but like this kind of portrayal of anybody in like the government or like related to the government as like complete imbeciles, and like they don't know what they're doing, and like they just keep making the situation worse, which is how the FBI is in Die Hard, where they come in, they're like, we got to do all this stuff by the book, and it's like exactly what the bad guys want to happen. And like they're flying in the helicopter like, yeah, I'm just thinking like 30% casualties, and the guy's like, I can live with that, and like that kind of stuff. It's like the same kind of stuff out of the sheriff, where like this small town sheriff is acting like he's gonna be like this big bad guy who's gonna take out this like fucking Delta Force ninja and the fucking it's like, no, dude, just like just don't be a dick,
but
it's just keeps being a dick every step of the way. It just like won't let it go.
But at the same time, he's like trying to protect his town. That kind of very hard-headed sheriff. That not in my town. You can't. You can't do that in my town. You can't walk around and be a vagrant or a hobo. Like not up in here. That style of like, I'm just trying to protect my town, and then everything goes sideways because this Green Beret is killing, or like basically just showing everyone up and just crazy. It's like, all right, I got to de-escalate this situation, but every time I'm trying to de-escalate it, I'm escalating it more and more and more. Like, that's exactly what happens in the movie. It just keeps going up and up and up. It's like, how deep and crazy is this going to get trying to kill just one man? And it's just they escalated it way too much, where it's like, they could have been just more civilized, and none of that would have happened. And it's like, I think a great scene that epitomizes that is when Stallone basically, like you said, kind of maims all these people, like injures all these cops, and then pops up against Teasel, excuse me, I think his name is Brian Dennehy's character, and has the knife up to his throat, and he's like, let this go, like no more, like I could have killed these guys, like if you want a war, I'll fucking bring you a war, and like that's like the epitome of like, all right, like I get where it's, you have to defend your town. Like, this guy just injured all your cops, all your partners, and all your whole police staff. And it's like, if you don't go after him, it's like, what does that say about you? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, a lot of moral questions in this movie.
Yeah, and like, the one thing I noticed watching it this time that I did not notice the first time around was the beginning of this movie starts with him like smiling and like walking down the road to go visit his like army buddy from his unit, and like it's playing this like beautiful music, and like he's like looking at these like serene landscapes and stuff, and finds out that his buddy had cancer from like Agent Orange or something like that, and passed away. And that's kind of what sets him into this like kind of shitty mood, and why I think he's a little he gets a little testy with the sheriff, right off the bat. Though Rambo is definitely not the asshole in the initial interaction.
No.
The sheriff is for sure an asshole. And what's funny is basically this whole thing could have been avoided if the sheriff just let him get a meal and then be on his way. And
exactly.
avoided all the destruction and chaos, that ensued. But yeah, I mean, because it's like, basically what sets Rambo off is the death of his buddy, or finding out that his buddy's been dead, and that he's the last person in his unit that's still alive, and then the treatment by the sheriff, and then he just kind of starts resisting everything, just, I think, to kind of just be like, this is ridiculous. Like, I shouldn't have to be going through this,
I agree. I think it does a good job of making you like, a lot of people, I kind of want to reiterate this. A lot of people in America at this time, couldn't relate to these veterans at all.
Mm-hmm.
And it puts him as a relatable character. And that's like, I feel like what the movie's kind of trying to do.
Yeah.
And like make you root for the veteran in Vietnam that was, treated so poorly and has all these, PTSD and, has PTSD and all these horrible memories of war. I think they do a good job of that.
Yeah. And like, I think around this time, we had a lot of movies about Vietnam coming out in like the late 70s and early 80s. Full Metal Jacket, I think, Apocalypse Now. Maybe even Platoon was around now, or maybe a little bit later. But like there was a lot of fascination, I think, with examining Vietnam and like what happened there, through film and media. But like almost none of those things actually examine it from the like post-war point of view in the way that Rambo does, which is super, I think, meaningful, and why I think this movie has such like a good legacy, is because it actually is looking at it outside of the context of the actual war. And like, like the tagline of the movie, I think, is something like, the war comes home, like type of thing or whatever. It's like actually deals with the aftermath, more than the actual events in the war, which is, again, like very interesting, like I said. And I think a big part of why a lot of people really gravitate towards this movie and the whole series.
Man, who knew First Blood would get so deep on it?
I didn't think so either.
There's some cool fun facts about the movie too, like just like trivia and stuff. Stallone, when he's like fighting the cops in the police station, he accidentally broke one of the cops. His name is Lester. He broke his nose during the escape scene by elbowing him in the face, which you see that guy wearing a like bandage on his nose the rest of the movie, and it's a literal bandage, which is hilarious. So this movie, we haven't talked about it yet, but it was based on the novel First Blood, I'm pretty sure, and that coincidentally is exactly what happens in the book, and that wasn't supposed to happen in the movie, which is crazy.
Oh, interesting.
And the book is very different from this movie. They wanted to. He kills a lot of people in the book, a lot of people apparently. And in the movie, he's just like, Stallone was like, let's make him relatable. Basically, what we've been talking about this whole time. And I'm glad they did that, because if they made him kill these cops, I mean, maybe in the later '80s I could see it being like, but like, I think it really pushes the point across that he doesn't kill anyone.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's like the one saving grace about his character in this is that he doesn't kill everybody. So yeah, I think that was a really good decision.
Yeah. I think the whole chase scene between, like, where he, like, grabs that dirt bike and is, like, riding into the mountains, I think that's a really cool scene.
Oh, yeah. The
like,
jumps and stuff are pretty awesome, actually. Like,
yeah,
and
they're
there's
epic.
a lot of really good slow-mo shots in this movie, which is surprising for, the its
Slow-mo
age.
in general.
Yeah.
Apparently, the stuntman who was driving the police car, he suffered a broken back because he took a 70 mile per hour launch, and like the car went super airborne and like hit the ground so hard that it broke his freaking back, which is crazy. Because like I was like watching it and I just was like, man, this police car is like not an off-road vehicle, and they are just beating the living shit out of this police car. And like when it crashes and rolls down that like hill, that like actually happened. It wasn't supposed to happen, and they're just like, oh, I like that, and they just decided to keep it in the movie. So I thought that was pretty cool, and I enjoyed that kind of chase scene, but I also was kind of laughing at it, where it was kind of like ridiculous, where again, this sedan is just like doing all these jumps, and
it's a little over the top.
Yeah. Apparently there was a rough cut of this movie that was like over 3 hours, and Stallone and his agent hated the film so much. They thought it was so bad in fact that like he thought it would kill his career, and he wanted to buy the film, like parts of the film, so that they wouldn't release it. And finally they cut it down to 1 hour and 33 minutes, which again fits that 80s vibe of like quick hour 33 minutes. Like this movie was very quick. It's a quick watch, and this cut for 93 minutes set the precedence for future action movies, which is pretty cool. And again, Stallone was like not thrilled about this movie, and the studio put together like a 40-minute preview reel and showed it to the higher ups in the industry, and that reel, Stallone saw that reel and he's like, we actually have a really good movie here. So I thought that was pretty cool and interesting, because it's like, I don't know, I've made some short films in the past and been like, oh, this is terrible, and then like you recut it and you're like, oh, cool, yeah, we got something here. And I feel like a lot of movies are like that, where we've talked about it, especially in the 80s, where it's like these movies have crazy long cuts, and then they edit it down, and it's great. And like, I always find that interesting.
I think it's this movie being cut down and still being extremely like coherent and cohesive, I think is a testament to like how well it was actually like written and like put together. Because like we talked about Cobra, which was also like an original like 3 or 3.5 hour cut, and like there was a lot of like plot gaps and stuff like that in Cobra, or like a lot of backstory was kind of removed. But First Blood definitely holds up well as an 1.5-hour movie, and you're not missing anything.
No.
So yeah, I think that was probably a good choice.
Yeah, and I totally forgot this movie was that short, and I'm glad it was that duration. Like if it was a little longer, I would have been like, okay, because apparently like the whole scene where the police are looking for him in the forest, like where he's goes and hides in that tunnel, that was like 40 to 50 minutes long. I read.
Yeah, that would be way too long.
That's aggressive. But there's some cool other facts, like that rotten piece of canvas that Stallone finds and wears like the whole time, which is crazy because it's like super cold in the mountains and that's all he wears, which is insane. And it just shows like his Green Beret status, which is super cool. That they literally found that piece of canvas in the mountains, and they only had one. So like that was like the holy grail of like movie props, where they're like, yeah, like no one mess this up or ruin this, otherwise we're screwed. And he still has that rotten canvas today, which is
That's
pretty
cool.
Yeah. And speaking of like all the the locations, like the mountains, like the sets, you know, and like the locations and the mountains like mountainous areas, awesome, beautiful set and like, locations, and I thought that really added to the plot and the themes, and like, you know, being one man hidden in this massive jungle is like him and all these people kind of converging on him. It's, you know, kind of reminiscent of America and him being the veteran, and it's, you know, it just, there's so many things like that I think are really cool that you could, you know, dissect. I also like the scene where he is on that like cliff and like, you know, back dives and goes through the trees and stuff. So he did the last half of that stunt, and like, what did he? I think he dislocates his. He breaks his rib on the branch doing it a second time, and so
it's not surprising.
Like, yeah. So when he like actually like screams in pain, that's real, which is crazy. So I think a lot of the like injuries in this movie are really cool. Like where he's after that he's stitching up his arm, which I thought that effect was awesome.
Yeah,
like
really well done.
Yeah, I was blown away by that. Like that looks better than a lot of shit nowadays, in my opinion.
There's even like blood, like kind of like coming out of the cut and stuff. Like, really good effect in that scene.
So much so that apparently he went to a local hospital on a lunch break to like see if like how real it looked, and like blood was still pumping through the hidden tube underneath, and he even left like that makeshift sewing job that he does, and like all the nurses there were freaking out. And he's just like, oh, just give me some Tylenol or some pain reliever and I'll be all right. And they're like, oh my God, this is the tough. They literally thought he's like, oh, this is the toughest man on the planet. Like, Jesus. Which is hilarious. And a very Stallone kind of, you know, pompous thing to do. I think that's really funny. There's, you know, I think him being a Green Beret is really cool, but I also, like, the second I heard that he was a Green Beret, I thought of the Commando line, where he's like, you know, this Green Beret's gonna kick your ass. He's like, and then still, Schwarzenegger's like, you know, I ate Green Berets for breakfast, and I'm very hungry. And, like, I think that was kind of a knock, for sure, to Stallone in this movie.
Yeah, it probably was.
Yeah, the ending, I think, where he's like running around shooting with that like M60 is pretty interesting. Like it says that he only gets 8 years, sentenced to 8 years in prison for all the stuff that he does. How do you feel about that? Do you think that's like...
That's really low. Because there's like got like at least a dozen attempted murder charges, I would think, if not more. And then like all the property damage and everything too. Like I would think it'd probably be something like 25 to life.
Like
realistically, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
they need something to get Rambo 2 to happen, so 8 years, I guess.
We'll have to watch Rambo 2 on this podcast. We'll do it in the future for sure, because especially since you've never seen it, there's some wild parts in it. It'll tie into this episode. But I really like Stallone's final kind of breakdown where he's at the police station held up, and he's about to kill Brian Dennehy's character, and Troutman, the general, or his war buddy guy who like created him. They have that. Stallone has that monologue that's so good, and apparently the studio was very hesitant about this scene of him breaking down. They're like, we wanted him to be like tough, but apparently Stallone fought tooth and nail, saying that soldiers are going through this same scenario and same pushback from society, and their story needed to be told, and like that again drives home that the whole point of this movie.
Yeah, for sure. Like I think that scene in particular humanizes him.
Oh yeah.
And that's, I think, why at the end of the movie, as a viewer, you kind of give him the pass, for everything that's happened, is because it's like, yeah, like now I remember what was going on in the beginning of the movie. Like it brings it full circle.
Great
and it's
point.
like, oh yeah, like he's just like as, was, close to snapping anyway, just from, all the shit that he had to deal with at the beginning of the movie. And like, it's necessary for sure. And then I think also makes his like surrender a bit more believable, and like, I think buttons it up a bit, like very well. Cause the movie just kind of like drops off a cliff, like at the end, like in terms of like the action, like that's it. Like that monologue happens, and then he's like in handcuffs and like walking out, and the credits roll. And it's like, I think it's incredibly well done. Because like, because like there's not a good way out of that situation that he's in at the end. No. And like, you don't want to see him die. Obviously, like, I don't think he doesn't die in the book because there's sequels to the book.
Are you sure? Because I thought he does die in the book.
No, I thought there's a First Blood Part 2 book, at least. I could be wrong, though. Maybe I'm wrong. But
because they shot alternate endings where he does die.
Oh,
for the movie, and I thought he did die in the book. Maybe
he does, but like, there's only two ways out of that: you give up or you get killed. In that ending. So, I think it's I think humanizing him.
He does die.
He does?
die
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, yeah, I mean, the only other way out is for him to surrender, and I think that monologue, I think, creates the right atmosphere for him to surrender. And, like, walk away.
Yeah, and it's not really a happy ending. It's not a happy ending at all.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. Like you said, it kind of just drops off a cliff, and it's just like, okay, he's surrendered.
Which is like another, it's like also a good, metaphor or however, whatever terminology of like how they're like, there's no winners in war. Yeah. Nobody comes out on top at the end of this conflict. And like everyone is basically worse off because of this,
I also think that if he would have been killed in the movie, that wouldn't have been a good look for veterans.
Yeah.
There's no like saving grace then. Like
right.
That at the end it's he's saved. So I think that would have been definitely a poor decision to have him be killed.
Yeah, and like it's like a little bit of a redemption for his character too, because he opts not to execute this guy who's been terrorizing him, basically. Decides like, all right, I'm gonna just stop and turn myself in. Like, it's like there's a little bit of a redeeming quality at the end. while also, I think that's probably the biggest scene that gets you to be like, all right, I'm on Team Rambo,
Yeah, definitely. And it's kind of, all right, now we sympathize with these veterans of this war. And I think it's like that drives it home, that end monologue for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Then it sets you up to be rooting for him when he just massacres people in the second movie. So,
dude, he does. And the third movie, and the fourth, the fifth. Did you see the newest one, The Last Blood?
No, I haven't.
I liked it. I really liked it. Watching this one makes me want to go back and watch all the other ones. Like I said, we'll probably do the second one soon, but it definitely would be a good movie to do this month, even though we're not, especially since it came out around the same time as Commando. But we had to do the first one, and I like that we did the first one. And again, talking about it in the context that we have today makes me appreciate the movie even more than I do.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yep.
So
it's a nice little break from like the next two movies. I think are just hardcore action. So like, it's a nice like reprieve. But like there is like we talked about, like there's really good action in this movie. It's not the focus of the movie.
Yeah, agreed. So next we have Predator, which I am so stoked for.
Same.
It's one of my favorites. I watch it all the time, and I can't wait for it. And then we're gonna do what? Tango and Cash, right? And I've never seen that movie.
Me either.
It's from the '80s, and it's Stallone and Kurt Russell, which is great. So I'm excited for that one. Because I wanted to put it in a movie in this month that we both haven't seen.
Yeah.
But I like that you hadn't seen Commando, and I like that we hadn't seen this in a long time. So I think this jacked January month is going to be good, and I think that obviously 80s movies. We're still going to watch Rambo Part 2 and all these other movies that are crazy action packed. But I'm also excited for February. I was just thinking about it today, about what we're gonna do, and we'll dive into that probably in a little bit, like in the next few episodes. So but I enjoyed this movie, and I definitely have a bigger appreciation for it now, for sure.
Yeah, same. I'm glad we watched this. I'm especially glad we watched this before we watched the second one. I feel like if I had watched the second one, then came back to this, I might not have felt the same way.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Well, cool. I'm excited for next week, and we hope you guys enjoyed Commando, and we hope you enjoyed this episode. We got a little deep on this episode, more than we usually do.
But next week is going to be a fucking blast, so...
Yes. So, some depressing subject matter and in this one a little bit, and then just carnage in the next one.
Yeah.
Carnage and comedy, because it's classic. All right, guys. Well, we'll catch you next week, and we appreciate you guys listening.
Yep. See ya.